The most you ever saw.
The calls to reopen begin almost immediately.
I hope we can do this by Easter.
Mask mandates and business restrictions turn political, and President Trump makes public health officials visibly uncomfortable with this outlandish suggestion.
Supposing we hit the body with a tremendous, whether it's ultraviolet or just very powerful light.
The virus ravages the Northeast, but explodes elsewhere by the summer.
The official statistic, Dr. Fauci, is that 80,000 Americans have died from the pandemic.
Most of us feel that the number of deaths are likely higher than that.
Then social justice protests collide with the pandemic. By August, stimulus talks stall, and the debate over reopening schools intensifies. More of the COVID map turns red. In Texas, patients are airlifted from El Paso to other cities.
Over the last 10 days, we've seen this 300% increase. It's unprecedented.
In October, President Trump tests positive. He's whisked away to Walter Reed, and within days, a dramatic unmasking as he returns to the White House.
And now I'm better, and maybe I'm immune. I don't know.
The holidays bring warnings of potential super spreader events, but in December, new hope arrives.
This is a historic moment. The first trucks carrying the vaccine pulling out of the Pfizer plant, escorted by U.S. Marshals.
The Moderna and Johnson & Johnson vaccines are not far behind.
The lifeline for our country and our world.
You exhausted?
Yeah. I'm tired of patients dying with their family members on the phone and not able to see them. Sorry. Yeah.
Now another breathtaking figure. More than 500,000 Americans gone. A year ago, who would have fathomed the loss or the resilience?
And Gabe joins me now live from Minneapolis. Gabe, good morning. You've been reporting from hospitals across the country over the last year, including the one where you're standing right now in Minneapolis. So how different are things there today than on your last visit, say a few months back?
Well, Willie, here at Abbott Northwestern Hospital, there were about 80 COVID patients when we visited in November. Now that number is down to less than 25. Nationwide, the number of daily COVID cases has dropped by about 75% since early January, and there's certainly a lot more hope at many hospitals across the country. It's been a welcome change of pace. And for some of those healthcare workers, though, Willie, it's hard to believe that it's been 1 year since the pandemic started. In other ways, Willie, it's felt more like 5.
Yeah, we cannot thank them enough. We say this morning the same thing we said a year ago. Thank God for all those healthcare workers. Gabe Gutierrez in Minneapolis. Gabe, thanks so much. Coming up next here, a new Sunday sit-down with Amy Poehler on directing her Netflix movie about modern-day high school. Her days at SNL and the magic of collaborating with her old friend Tina Fey. And then a life well lived. The reggae legend who took a Jamaican sound and spread it around the world with the help of a bandmate named Bob Marley. And as we head to break, our photo of the week. Pope Francis attending a prayer vigil for the victims of war in Mosul, Iraq this morning. A city once claimed by ISIS as its capital. The Pope surrounded by bombed out churches, destroyed in the effort to drive out the Islamic State. Despite security and public health concerns, Pope Francis insisted on going ahead with his 4-day trip to Iraq to support the country's embattled Christian minority and to promote healing between the world's great faiths. And Doug.
Hey, Limu. How great is it that we get to tell everybody how Liberty Mutual customizes your car insurance so you only pay for what you need? I mean, sorry. Whoops. Meow, good evening. Oh, meow. Nope. Oh, what? I'm an emu. No, buddy, it's a filter. Only pay for what you need.
Liberty, 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 liberty.
You want health?
Domestic violence or those who have survived human trafficking.
During a pandemic, we've all been hit in a different way, and the community really came out this year, even bigger than they did in my first year, wanting to help those that had been hit by the pandemic. And women have been hit harder than men. More women have lost their jobs than men during the pandemic. So unfortunately, these kits are more needed this year than ever before, because there's just a group of community here that has been really hit by this pandemic.
And those kits were filled with items donated by the public to Women's Day of Service. Students at Western Dakota Technical Institute in Rapid City will be able to learn a new skill in the heart of beef country. Wall Meats has partnered with the school to help get a meat processing program started. It usually takes years for someone to become a butcher, but this new educational partnership could change that.
The academic part of it actually helps us learn or bridge the gap of knowledge in cutting meat. So Western Dakota Tech is the academic part of this, and we are the practical part. We're, if you consider the lab part of an education format.
Wall Meats will provide space at its facility where students can learn the meat cutting and processing during hands-on courses. The classes start in the fall. Adam?
Not a bad start to the day out there as we head west this time around. We go to Eagle Butte with a beautiful sunrise overhead, blue skies on the way, but it is going to be a little on the windy side, not to mention pretty dry as well. From Eagle Butte, we head east to Mulbridge. 42, not much of a breeze to speak of at the moment, but that's going to change sooner rather than later. Still, not a bad way to start the day as we take a look at the water up in northern parts of KELO land. Plenty of blue skies on the way, also plenty of unseasonable warmth as high temperatures climb into the 60s and even into the low 70s in a couple of areas. Keep in mind, our average high is around 38 this time of year. We usually don't see this until the middle to later part of April, so a very, very nice preview indeed. We do have a little bit of cloud cover to the east. That's going to greatly on out of here as it moves east of I-29 and eventually into Minnesota. Beyond that, well, that's going to be just about it. High pressure at the surface and an associated ridge will keep a very arid air mass in place over really the entirety of the central United States. If you want rainfall, you have to head off the coast of North Carolina to get anywhere near that for us. And goodness knows we really could use some rain. We'll try and get some in place as we head into the middle of the week on Futurecast, but until we get there, a few more dry and mainly sunny days on the way today, tomorrow, and to a lesser extent Tuesday. By Wednesday morning, though, that's when we start to get that moisture in place. Rain, snow chance north and west of Sioux Falls, but a rain chance Wednesday evening into the night. Now, we're not talking about a lot of moisture. Even through Wednesday evening, we're talking about, in general, a tenth to a quarter of an inch of liquid water, with the exception being out toward the Black Hills, where they have that better opportunity at seeing some more snow rather than rain. Overall, the pattern is pretty quiet, but you notice, though, by the middle of the week, that ridge does flatten out. That comes along with the arrival of our cold front and associated area of low pressure. Until we get to that, though, let's focus on the good. And there's a lot of that today. Temperatures in the 60s to low 70s, with lows tonight generally in the low to mid 30s. Your 7-day forecast features more warmth through Tuesday, and then everything comes to a screeching halt on Wednesday. We go from the low 70s to around 50, with that chance for rain and even a rumble of thunder or two in Sioux Falls before we dry out by next weekend. In Aberdeen, it's a rain-snow chance.
And to help reopen schools, plus programs to fight child poverty and protect families facing eviction. Joining us now with his reaction is Democratic Senator Alex Padilla from California, who was up for those all-nighters in the Senate and is joining us now. Nevertheless, thanks for being with us, Senator. You voted for this bill despite the modifications that we just described. But you do wonder, from the perspective of progressives like yourself, do you think that Chuck Schumer and Joe Biden are bending over backwards too much to please moderates like Joe Manchin?
Well, good morning, Abby. Thanks for having me on the show. And look, if it means pulling off more all-nighters in the weeks and months ahead to get more resources and help for families and communities that are hurting, I would be happy to do it again over and over. As far as the final version of this bill, look, a couple of things that I wish we wouldn't have flexed on, but the bottom line is this. This is a huge deal. As you just mentioned, tremendous amount of resources that are now closer to being on the way to families through direct assistance, to families through the expansion of child tax credits, to small businesses, and not just school districts, but state and local governments whose budgets have been devastated by the economy because of COVID, and of course, huge infusions to expand vaccine programs, testing and tracing programs. This is the type of comprehensive, bold action that we've been needing since the beginning of the pandemic, and we're finally moving on it now.
In just the past few weeks, House Democrats have passed a slew of bills, big Democratic priorities like the minimum wage hike, like voting rights, police reform, and LGBTQ protections. But as we look toward the Senate, none of that will go anywhere as long as you need 60 votes in the Senate. Now, this COVID relief bill was passed through a reconciliation process, which only needs 50 votes. But last week, Senator Joe Manchin said again he would, quote, never eliminate the filibuster. What options do you, as a Democrat, if you want to move forward on some of those other priorities?
Look, at the end of the day, action on those key items, whether it's raising the minimum wage, policing reform, other types of criminal justice reform, action on climate, healthcare, and more, there's multiple ways to get there, and we'll exercise all options. Look, I agree, and you've heard me say this before, I'm in favor of abolishing the filibuster. There's a couple of Democratic senators who have said they're not there yet. If we continue to see obstruction from our Republican colleagues, as we saw through this COVID relief package, then I think the patient's going to wear thin, even on moderate Democrats. But we'll see. In the meantime, we'll exercise as many options as we can, whether it's through state legislation, budget reconciliation, or otherwise, to continue to make progress.
Do you think
ahead here, so now let's take a look at some of the other big stories that we're following this morning happening right now. The Senate has passed President Biden's $1.9 trillion COVID relief plan by just one vote and no Republican support. The bill will now head back to the House for final passage. Democratic leaders say that they are confident they can get the bill signed into law this week and hope to get those checks out to Americans who need them by the end of this month.
Also right now, a Bowling Green State University student is in critical condition following what is believed to have been a hazing incident involving alcohol at an off-campus Pi Kappa Alpha event. The student has been identified as 20-year-old sophomore Stone Foltz. The fraternity has been placed on interim suspension.
And President Biden will mark the 56th anniversary of Bloody Sunday today by signing an executive order promoting voting access to all Americans. On March 7th, 1965, state troopers beat and tear gassed hundreds of peaceful protesters crossing the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama, as they marched for their right to vote. Among them was former Congressman John Lewis, who died in 2020 and will be honored today.
And we do start this half hour with Buckingham Palace bracing for Harry and Meghan's interview tonight with Oprah Winfrey. The couple airing out their grievances with the royal family. ABC's Julia McFarlane is in London with more. Julia, good morning.
Dr. Zoom, no. They taught me a motto and they used to tell me, tell the woman, I don't care if you have to kill your baby and sell the blood, I need my money. That was how brutal that lifestyle was.
And this is Minneapolis.
This is Minneapolis.
And how many years were you in the gang?
I started in the gang. I started the first prison gang in the state of Minnesota in 1974. And once I got out,
were you in prison when
yeah,
you started?
St. Cloud Penitentiary, called it Black Brotherhood Development Organization. It was a gang, but we just called it something so that to get by. And when I got out of prison, my family was being threatened by a group from Chicago. And so we, as a family, just banded together, and I introduced them to guns, and because I knew how to get guns, and how to defend themselves. That family later became the Rolling 30s Blood Street Gang. We're boy heavy in our family. In some of our families, there's at least 12 to 18 kids. And so when they came up here from Alabama, they found me because I was up here having a lot of money and successful. And we started a family. It was all family. Everybody thinks it started with a bunch of people. Yeah, it was a bunch of people.
Excuse me.
So we started that, and you had to be a blood relative to be in it, to hold rank. And they call me Uncle Johnny and stuff. I'm the oldest one.
And did you sell drugs, prostitution? What was it exactly?
Okay, if it wasn't for drugs and guns, gangs couldn't survive. Prostitution is just goes hand in hand. You know, drug dealers' biggest client are prostitutes that go out and get money, go out, they bring customers to us.
Okay.
We, 24 hours a day, probably 30 guys on a shift selling drugs.
Selling guns too?
We kept the guns.
Okay.
You know, robbing a gun store was not unusual. A lot of the drug addicts that, would steal guns would bring them to us. So we had an arsenal of guns.
Is this Minneapolis now?
Minneapolis, South Minneapolis, Lake and 30th.
In fact, there's a George Floyd connection, you said. What is that?
Well, the Rolling 30s controlled everything that meant in the 30s block, so 3,000 to 3,900. So George Floyd is 3,800.
Oh, so that's where that incident happened. Not that he was part of your gang.
No.
But
that's part of the
your
area.
gang used to run that area.
Well, they still hold it down.
They still do. Mm-hmm. Is that gang still in existence?
Yes. You don't hear about it much because a lot of the leadership, there's 30 of us in jail for murder, and they're all relatives. And a lot of the older leadership has sort of went away, and the younger guys are sort of running it. Not many though.
Is your life in danger? Did they ever? Any of them come to Christ like you did?
Yes, a number of them.
All right, let's talk about that. What is it that got you out of the gang and brought you? What happened?
Being broken, I had got into so much trouble. I was featured on Channel 9 News as the leader of an international gang, actually, that was doing a lot of transactions, and it broke me because at the time I was masquerading as a teacher, and my students were crying because they seen me get arrested on TV, and it broke me, and I just barricaded myself in my office, and I.
So you were a teacher in the school?
Yeah, Minneapolis.
So you had a degree?
No.
Oh.
I had a skill. Back then, I taught computer programming, and I used to teach it for Honeywell. I worked at Honeywell. Without a degree, I just learned it.
Gotcha.
And because you taught in the public sector, the schools would grab professionals.
I see.
And I was a professional.
So your students are crying when they see their teacher get arrested?
Yes.
And what happened next?
I went in my office and I told Jesus if he was real, he had to come right then. And he came. Now, I can't tell you, I know how I felt. I can't describe it, but I knew I was saved right there.
So you got saved just by praying by yourself?
By myself.
And then what happened?
I was raised in a church.
Yeah.
So
and didn't you have some grandma praying for you or something?
My grandma told me I was going to be a minister, and that's what my calling was, and she prayed for me and told me who Jesus was.
Did she live to see your conversion?
No, she didn't live to see my conversion.
Okay. All right.
Metrolina greenhouses. So Abe and Art can.
Those machines, I think we have some areas where there might be some agreement, and I certainly think at the state level.
Words of the blockade reaches strike headquarters at the Penn Gilley buildings.
Kids posting videos of their recitals, plays, and concerts done at home. Parents got their graduates to put on caps and gowns and have their own living room ceremonies. North Carolina Principal Tabari Wallace is someone who wanted to make sure his seniors got the recognition they deserved and the promise of a graduation at some point. So he organized a personal celebratory parade for the graduates at his high school. The West Craven High School principal decided to dress up in full cap and gown and visit his seniors one by one with a stack of yard signs personalized with each student's face and message, "You will graduate." As Principal Wallace placed each sign in a yard, he asked the students, "Please accept this as a token from the Craven County Board of Education, administration, and the teachers until we can finally get you across the stage." He's someone that needed to be highlighted in the story of spreading sunshine.
Very, very cool. Janice, how have you made your own? You're telling other people's stories, but yours is so powerful because you've taken a tragedy in your own family, and yet you've been a fighter, but you make your own sunshine as well. How have you made your way through the past year?
Writing this book actually brought me great solace during a time where there was darkness. When I was writing these stories, I would go for walks with my kids, and Matthew would say, "What story are you working on today, Mama?" So I feel like this book has to be out in the universe, not only for people to see these stories, but for my own self-care and well-being.
All right, Make Your Own Sunshine by Janice Dean. Everyone go get your own copy. Get a little story of positivity, maybe make your own day a little bit sunnier. Thank you so much, Janice, for sharing it with us.
Thanks, Janice.
We love you, JD.
Love you guys. Love you too.
All right, turning now to your headlines. Twitter and Facebook allows Louis Farrakhan to share misinformation about coronavirus vaccines, despite their policies against false claims. Farrakhan's remarks at a convention last month were still available on Twitter and Facebook as of last night. In his remarks, Farrakhan refers to vaccines as a vial of death. Last week, Twitter announced users may not use the site to spread misinformation about COVID vaccines. Venezuela is introducing new banknotes in an effort to help its struggling economy. For only 53 cents, you can have a note worth $1 million in the South American country. The new currency will begin flowing tomorrow. The Venezuelan president is pledging to be the world's first fully digital economy to help fight inflation. That ought to do it. And pro golfer Bryson DeChambeau electrifies the crowd at the Arnold Palmer Invitation with this massive drive. Watch.
And that's where he's headed, just a little bit right of it, but this ball appears to be hammered.
DeChambeau celebrating after, get this, he launched the ball 370 yards. The golfer declined the straight shot over the lake during the first 2 rounds because of the wind, but decided, I guess, that the wind was in his favor, so he went for it, and he nailed it, clearing that water. And those are your headlines. Canada?
Are either of you good golfers?
Nice.
I'm decent at mini golf, but I'm a terrible golfer. Do we have any golfers here?
Actually, no.
Nope.
No.
Poorly.
What about Rick? Rick Reichmuth, are you a good golfer? I don't know.
Wait, good golfer or golfer? I mean, nobody's a good golfer.
Just a good golfer. We're looking for a good golfer.
Nobody's. I mean, I golf occasionally, but that's it. All right, golf season's coming up, man. We're gonna be able to get out there. Temperatures right now really cold across the grid.
Twist until it clicks. Tide Pod's Child Guard packaging. Millions of people are saying yes to Allegra, including the expert.
To Sioux Falls, this is going to be mainly rain as we head toward.
This, Abby, and you say apology, but really, what apology? What that sounded like to so many women who understand the position that these staffers were in, whether personally or through stories of their own or through friends, is that wasn't an apology. That was a, hey, if I did something to offend you, I guess I feel bad about it. He didn't outright understand what he did. And that, I think, is a huge problem, Abby, as well, because he went on and on about how he didn't understand that what his behavior had offended people, and then if it did, that he was sorry. Well, what does that say about his judgment, Abby? How can somebody in his position, who is supposedly so experienced and so brilliant, not understand the kind of power dynamic that he was thrusting upon his underlings in the kinds of conversations that he was having? Well, that's a huge problem about his judgment.
Yeah, and to that point, he claims that he didn't understand how this would be interpreted. Charlotte Bennett seemed to imply that this was clearly a pattern that he was emboldened by his power in the office, but also his power nationally. And take a listen. This is Andrew Cuomo 2.5 years ago, talking about Me Too versus Andrew Cuomo now.
I believe sexual harassment has gone on for decades. And I believe society has been slow in the response. And I believe powerful people have gotten away with sexual harassment for a long, long time. I now understand that I acted in a way that made people feel uncomfortable. It was unintentional, and I truly and deeply apologize for it.
So Alice, doesn't he know better?
He certainly does, or if he doesn't, he certainly should. And if you listen very carefully to his statements with regard to this, he has never apologized for his inappropriate behavior or acknowledged and accepted responsibility for it, but rather he simply characterizes them as a misunderstanding on the part of the woman. And this is a further conversation that needs to be had, whether or not this is illegal or legal. It is a question politically and in the business world whether or not this is ethical or unethical or immoral, and that's the conversation that we need to have. And look, it's really important in all of these cases where allegations are made that the women be heard and the person accused has due process. We need a full and transparent investigation. But the point of the matter here is that he is in a position of power talking to people that are subordinates of his, and it needs to be looked at. And it's really also critical that we look at the reason why the Governor Cuomo has gone from the darling of the Democratic Party to an albatross of the Democratic Party in a New York minute is because we not only have these allegations of sexual impropriety, but other actions on his part where he has covered up numbers dealing with COVID, and that is also a major concern. So he has two big distractions in what I see as a failure of leadership.
I do want to talk about that because, you know, this nursing home scandal is profoundly important, especially to the families who lost loved ones in this crisis. Where does this go, Maria, for him? I mean, on some level, these are just as important. Does there need to be more accountability for what happened there, and also more accountability for what happened in New York broadly, and whether all of the fame that he seemed to receive as a result of it was deserved at the end of the day?
Yeah, absolutely it needs to be looked at, Abby. Imagine the families of those nursing home patients who died and who are now reading these horrendous, gut-wrenching reports about how their governor and his aides tried to cover up those numbers. That is something I think that is probably worse, you know, as gut-wrenching in a different way, but worse from the standpoint of leadership and pure public policy. And that, I think, is going to be something that he may not survive. But look, this is all up to the people of New York. And if you look at a Quinnipiac poll that came out a couple of days ago, 55% of New Yorkers right now don't think that he should resign. That may very well change as we are seeing bad news after bad news after bad news continues to come out on the sexual harassment scandals. More aides are coming out saying, yes, he sexually harassed me, he acted inappropriately, he's abusive with his power, and then more is going to come out on the investigation of the nursing home scandal. So I think it's going to be very difficult at the end of the day for him to survive this, and you now have many Democrats in New York, either in the congressional area or in the state legislature, that are calling for his resignation.
We'll see.
People of color at a rate that is the same as the general population, but we have to solve the underlying problem that black people have access to care and testing, because there will be another pandemic, and even without the pandemic we will still face health inequality. Are we doing enough to solve for that?
No, we are not. Allie, thank you for having me back. What we are doing is ignoring the systemic racism that is underlying the differences in access to health care, the differences in access to excellent educational opportunities, the difference in access to jobs and quality housing and clean environments. We are ignoring the impacts of systemic racism. In fact, racism is a huge problem, but I would say racism denial is a huger problem. It's a black hole. It's got lots of mass, but it's sucking things into it. And the same way that COVID denial by former President Trump has led to the disastrous situation that we find ourselves in 1 year later, racism denial is enabling people to not name a problem and therefore to ignore it and to individualize the problem, to blame vaccine hesitancy as opposed to lack of access. What we need to do is, yes, we need to, I'll just say this, increased supply is not necessarily going to increase access. So we need to be deliberate and intentional in all of our efforts. We also need to bring vaccine plus. So when we go into communities of color with vaccine, we need to also go in with jobs and education and quality housing and green space and environmental cleanup and everything, or else we will see the pattern yet again.
Dr. Stanford was telling me that while there is some hesitancy that she faces amongst black Americans in Philadelphia, her bigger problem is still just give me more vaccine. I'll get every last vial of vaccine that you give me into the arms of black people. We can deal with hesitancy a little bit later. Right now, we're still not getting enough vaccine just for the people we can vaccinate.
That's right. And I just want to say, on the vaccine distribution, we are so delighted that we now have 3 vaccines in this country where all of them prevent severe cases and death. But I also want to warn us that as we rapidly distribute all of our vaccines, there should be no community that just has one option. That what we need to do, because lack of options is what put people of color more at the front line in terms of exposure to the vaccines. Lack of options is constraining us in all ways. And so I would say we need to have at least 2 vaccines in every community. This is just a little bit of a warning as we roll out all of the different vaccines. I also want to say that, may I just say one more thing, Allie?
Yeah, because of course.
Inaction in the face of need is a hallmark of structural racism. And when we continue to see disproportionate impact of COVID-19 or disproportionate infant mortality or disproportionate anything, and we do not act, we are participating in structural racism. There was recently, the Journal of the American Medical Association recently had a podcast which was characterized as structural racism for skeptics, in which the host said, maybe we shouldn't say the word racism. What is this structural racism thing? This racism denial is a huge problem in addressing racism. We need to name racism. We need to say that racism exists, that racism is a system, that racism saps the strength of the whole society, and that we can act and we must act to dismantle racism. We can't just say, oh, that's a thing. I don't have time for that right now.
Your words are wise, Dr. Jones. We always appreciate you sharing them with our viewers. Dr. Kamara Jones is an
qualities, man. I saw my son in these conversations. I saw my father in these conversations.
And newly released Letters to Bob. Hope, that is.
I bet when I first started, you thought I was going to be lousy, huh?
Listen for the trumpet.
The exclusive spot.
That we're able to tell this story and uphold Chairman Fred and his legacy. You know what I mean? That's what's incredible about it. The fact that we've got this film together at a major studio with everything that is being said and everything that happens within it. But you can see with what Chairman Fred and the Black Panther Party stood for, which is like free medical care, free education, and feeding the kids, you know. So for me, for it to reach a bigger audience is incredible.
And Shaka, you've talked a lot about the parallels between the late 60s and today. The FBI would make a false equivalence between the KKK and the Black Panthers. You know, famously in a line in the movie, you talk about that, and how that's similar to the arguments that are being made about the Capitol rioters, comparing them to Black Lives Matter protesters. You wrote this film, started working on this film years ago, but did you think that it would have the resonance that it has today?
You know, as my editor, Kristen Sprague, once remarked when we were working, he said, you know, these topics are evergreen. And so, you know, unfortunately, I can't envision a world where this movie isn't relevant.
One of the things that's so striking about the film is seeing that Fred Hampton was 21 years old when he was killed, around the age of some of these protesters who are out in the streets today. What was it like for you to learn about America's racial politics as you inhabited this character? And what did you learn about the Black Panther? Did it change how you approached that character at all?
I think I was very. I mean, I studied the civil rights struggle in school, and so I knew quite a bit about it. But we didn't study the Black Panther Party. But I kind of arrived with the Black Panther Party in a very organic way, just being a young black man navigating a white country and the challenges that brings. I arrived to it not from a different perspective. So for me, this process deepened what I was feeling about myself and about my friends and about people life in America. It kind of deepened that and got me a better understanding about the self-love that they had and the love that they had for the black community, and they were uncompromising about it.
Yeah, and to that point, Shaka, so many Americans never learn about the Black Panther Party really at all, or about Fred Hampton. What do you think people should know about Fred Hampton's life and legacy? And I know that you have launched an educational program to that end. What should people take away both from the film and from what they might be Googling right now about the Black Panther Party?
We made the movie to counter the propaganda that's been put forth, in history books and articles about them being a racist, terrorist, militant group, when in fact they were community organizers, and as Daniel alluded to, were building medical clinics, busing children and their families to prisons to visit their incarcerated loved ones. They did clothing drives, they fought against slumlords. They essentially were trying to provide, poor folks with the services that the government was supposed to be providing for them and that they weren't providing for them. And so that's one, piece of info we want to put forth. And then in terms of, Fred Hampton, the man and the leader, just that, he was a person who really loved his people and was unafraid.
And thanks to Daniel Kaluuya and Shaka King for being with us. And
Buble bounce
It's not with Envy. There's also a guac-inspired face sponge set, and you can put them all in your makeup bag that looks like a Chipotle brown bag. All right, and ahead of tonight's NBA All-Star Game, some famous faces got together for a chat. GMA can reveal that Vice President Kamala Harris and actor, sexiest man alive, Michael B. Jordan, will share the taped conversation they had over Zoom. They talked about a range of topics promoting the importance of getting vaccinated. So a lot of topics there. Of course, it is All-Star Weekend. It will be exciting to see what happens.
All right. Mona Kosar Abdi, and this morning, did you have a good time? Everybody was friendly?
This week?
You were here?
Yes.
On the weekend?
Now that you added into the group chat.
Especially this
I
one as
wasn't
well.
added to any group chat.
Thank you so much for watching, folks. Of course, we're always on GoodMorningAmerica.com, and stay tuned for This Week later this morning with Martha Raddatz. Take care.
This week on GMA, Wake Up with Jennifer Garner, Stephen A. Smith, Daddy Yankee, and Kelly Rowland.
Well, happy Sunday, everybody. It has been a very nice stretch of weather recently, and it's going to continue. In fact, today is going to be a very warm day with a lot of sunshine, and those winds will remain.
Keep a praying that God will do whatever He has to. That's a hard prayer. I pray, God, do whatever you have to get me and my family and friends in heaven. And sometimes that can be kind of hard.
Yeah.
But it's worth praying. You don't want to not pray it either, because you want to spend eternity in the right place. John, God bless you. Thanks so much. We're going to do another program with John talking about Black Lives Matter, what he thinks of that. And so we'll be doing another program with him. But God bless you. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for watching The Pastor Study. You can watch more of our programs at pastorstudy.org. We are on the air preaching the gospel to our viewers. Would you consider supporting our ministry? You may do so at Pastor.
together night.
Like percent compared to their peak. They're down to about 2,500.
When he retired in the 70s, he was making
that stayed on the product consistently had tremendous health benefits. It just
strong and white, but every day acidic food and drink can wash these minerals away, weakening and dulling enamel over time. Pronamel Mineral Boost protects teeth by
Hi, I'm Wade with Digital Technologies. Since 2002, our team.
Except, I miss you.
This whole business with the bankruptcy should be a piece of cake.
And from the bench, Ella Flippin back in. We got.
He's loved you, He saved you, He has a purpose for your life, a plan for your life, and He...
Programs possible.
Check out the outdoor campus here in Sioux Falls, South Dakota.
With a variety of different courses and activities, their group's coordinator, Derek Clawwater, showed me one activity in particular, ice fishing.
We are going to drill some holes. We're going to put our bait down the holes. And we also have an underwater camera, so you'll see what's down there and below and stuff like that as well. One thing about ice fishing is safety, though. You may have heard a lot. Lots of accidents do happen on the ice, so we'll go over a few safety things. It's all free of charge. All of our programs are free due to the sale of hunting and fishing license. But a typical class lasts about an hour to hour and a half. So we go over the intro, the safety, and then we spend the rest of the time hopefully trying to catch some fish down there.
If you're looking to do the same, Google the outdoor campus in Sioux Falls and check out all the activities and courses they have to offer. I'm Helena Lanson, and this has been your Minco Minute.
New wings from the chicken experts at Pizza Ranch. Now offering boneless, traditional, sauced, and tossed. Order for carryout and available for delivery. Try the new wings from Pizza Ranch. Order online at pizzaranch.com.
The Harry's Razor is... And no matter where you...
To just play off of it.
Tyler Guyman sinking the game from beyond half court. Washburn takes down Northwest Missouri State, who had been the #1 team in all of D2 until Washburn and Tyler happened.
And #1, I mean, we called it the goal of the year. Still a remark, but you get the point. Matthew Barzell. He's fast. He's nifty. I mean, come on.
Creative.
The concentration. He said it's a top 2, maybe 3 goal in his life. You think? I don't even want it 5-2.
This is Sports Center AM.
A first.
Good morning. I'm Jane Pauley, and this is Sunday Morning. The COVID pandemic first began to really hit home here in America during the early days of March 2020. So what are we to make of all that's happened 1 year later? It's a question we'll be considering this morning, beginning with Martha Teichner.
What has the year of COVID done to us as a nation psychologically?
The honest answer is that we really don't know, because humans are so complex.
A year of loss? A lost year.
No person of America should be in hunger lines.
We turn to 6 leaders in their fields for reflection.
What artists will not become artists because this moment is gone?
Our year of COVID, coming up this Sunday morning.
While COVID restrictions have affected everyday life across the country, perhaps no place as much as one small border town that's very much on point. Lee Cowan will be showing us around.
This is one of the few places in America COVID didn't take a foothold. And yet, it's dealt a hammer blow nonetheless.
So what's it feel like here now?
Ghost town. It's a ghost town. I mean, if you wanted to do a film on a ghost town, you wouldn't have to pay anyone to leave. They're already gone.
Point Roberts, America's little corner of Canada, and how COVID has closed it off. Later on Sunday morning.
During some not so long ago difficult times in our country, Americans found comic relief by going on the road with Bob Hope. To this day, he's one of our legends of comedy, as Tracy Smith reminds us.
I just want you boys to see what you're fighting for, that's all.
In the darkest days of World War II, a visit from Bob Hope brought a little light, and no one knew that more than his family back home. What was it like to have Bob Hope as a dad?
Dad was a really fun guy, and he was more like a friend, a playmate, than he was a dad.
Bob Hope, a legend at war and on the home front, ahead on Sunday morning.
Michelle.
$300 to people who are unemployed by no fault of their own. I want that to continue seamlessly. I think that basically, if you look at all the things that we've done in targeting, how we help the families, how we help their children, with child tax credits, there was so much more that we were doing. We're giving more help to individuals than ever before. 300 was seamless. It continues on through the end of August if needed. And that's what we tried to do. When we put the cap on, Chuck, we've never given. This is the first time we've ever allowed for tax deduction from your unemployment benefits. And basically, to be fair for the people out there working all the time, paying their share of taxes. That was something we were concerned about also. So we limited it to $150,000. We capped it that anybody over $150,000 could not use that offset. Anybody below it that's struggling and working, more the middle class, is able to do that. That was a fair compromise. We worked through that and got it done.
I know you're doing the round of shows today, but just to remind you, I'm Jake, well, not Chuck. Your move forced the Senate to stay up all night voting after you spent the day on calls with Chuck Schumer, even President Biden. You were talking to Senator Portman on the other side. How much pressure were you under, and what did President Biden have to say to you?
Well, Jake, on that, President Biden and I have been friends. I have the utmost respect. I think he's the right person, the right place at the right time. Our conversations have always been cordial, and the only thing he's ever said, Joe, never go against your convictions. Always do what you think is right. And I always appreciate that encouragement, and we work very well together. Working with all of my other friends back and forth, Jake, sometimes can be challenging, but the bottom line is that's what it's about, negotiations. I work with my Republican friends. I work with my Democrat caucus and my friends. We try to find that middle. With that sometimes it gets a little frustrating at times, but the bottom line is at the end result, we got one tremendous piece of legislation. This bill, Jake, does an awful lot for a long period of time. It basically goes out to 2024. We're getting help to every city, every municipality. Every one of those are going to have help now. Then they have to basically control their own destiny. They can fix a water line, a sewer line, internet, without kowtowing to that bureaucratic mess that may be making them jump through hoops. We've done everything we can. We're helping children now more so than ever before. We're making our schools safer. We're making it basically able to get back into the classroom in the safest atmosphere humanly possible. We're helping businesses reopen. The vaccines are getting in people's arms. We are going to go back to normal. We're going to get to some normal, and the new normal is not going to be like the old normal, and it has a chance to be even better.
I know that bipartisanship is very important to you. President Biden says it's important to him as well. At the end of the day, this legislation passed with no Republican votes in the House, no Republican votes in the Senate. Some Republicans tried to offer to negotiate. It didn't happen. At the end of the day, who do you blame for the fact that this bill got no Republican support in Congress?
I never do place blame. What I do place is basically we don't have the tolerance to sit down and work more. But let me tell you, Jake, this was more of a bipartisan bill than you might think. First of all, the president asked for 10 Republicans to come over and see him. That was the first visit to the White House, was my Republican friends and colleagues that went and sat down. They offered their proposal. They didn't think it was adequate enough to do what President Biden has, his vision for America, and coming out and making sure that we can recover. I think what he did was correct, but he listened to them. And guess what? For the whole month, Jake, we've worked together. We've had Democrats and Republicans working together. A lot of the things that I was able to get in, or some changes that I was able to do because of the position I'm in, to hopefully help message that, if you will, made significant changes. We targeted, in this bill, we targeted where help was needed. We were able to target basically the people that need help, the children that need help, the schools that need help, the people on the front line, all of America. That's what we were able to do. And a lot of that was by talking with my colleagues and negotiating back and forth. And I was able to channel that through, I think, and hopefully make a bill that's a much more encompassing bill. I think it's a great piece of legislation, going to help a lot of people.
You know, a lot of progressives say for all that negotiation, none of those people you were working with, Senator Portman or whomever, none of them voted for the bill. And then they point to things got left out. And let me ask you about one of those things, because one Democratic priority that got dropped from the bill was a minimum wage increase, the federal minimum wage. And increasing the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour was one of President Biden's first campaign promises. Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Democrat in New York, she singled out you and Arizona Democrat Kyrsten Sinema in front of reporters on Capitol Hill last week. She said, quote, "The fact that we have two people in this entire country that are holding back a complete transformation in working people's lives, the same people who have held our country together throughout this pandemic, is wrong," unquote. What do you say to her? And on the issue of the federal minimum wage increase, is there any situation where you would go higher than $11 an hour?
Well, Jake, we're going to go and do something, because there's not one senator out of 100, not one, that does not want to raise the minimum wage, not one. And with that said, we're going to make that happen. The $15 minimum wage never fit in this piece of reconciliation. Those are the rules of the Senate, and we knew that from day one. And they made a big, I know they made a big issue about this, and I understand everyone has their right. The Congresswoman, you know, I respect where she's coming from. I respect her input. We have a little different approach. We come from two different areas of the country that have different social and cultural needs. And with that, you have to respect everybody. We're going to get that, but it's going to sit down and be done and I hope, in more of a collaborative way, bringing to it. Now, what I've done, Chuck...
How high would you go?
Well, here, let me tell you what needs to be done. Joe Biden has said, anybody that goes to work, and I believe this with all my heart, if you go to work every day, you should, at the end of the day, be above the minimum guidelines as far as poverty guidelines. You should be above that. That should be the absolute low base. Well, when you do it, and you figure the numbers, Chuck, it comes out to $11. That's how I got to 11. And we can do that very quickly, too, within a couple of years. Once we get to $11, then it should be indexed for inflation, so it never becomes a political football again. It should be the respect to the dignity of work, always being above the minimum wage of what the guidelines for poverty is, and being able to lift yourself way far above that by your skill sets and your determination. And that's all we're saying, and that's what we've been trying to work to. That's the easiest lift of all. When you have that many people that want to raise the minimum wage from being sinfully low at $7.25 to above the poverty guidelines, let's do it. And let inflation take us from the standpoint indexing it so we never fall below that.
Senator, let me ask you, we only have a couple minutes left, but I want to ask you about one of the issues coming to Capitol Hill. You've not yet said whether you're going to support or oppose President Biden's pick for Secretary of the Department of Health.
Right now, the FDA has approved Johnson & Johnson, and the CDC has recommended Johnson & Johnson as a one-dose vaccine. There is a clinical trial that looks at a second dose, and we'll have to see the results of that clinical trial. Right now, FDA has approved and CDC recommends Johnson & Johnson as a one-dose vaccine.
I want to bring up vaccine equity. You brought it up, and you said you guys are determined to do this in an equitable way. But just right here, Jeff, in the city where we live here in Washington, D.C., we are seeing this problem between, and I'm going local here, Wards 3 versus Ward 8. And Ward 3 is getting the most vaccinations. Ward 8 has the most deaths, and they're not getting the most vaccinations. They look like they're falling behind. It also happens to be the most African American community in Ward 8, and they're not getting enough vaccine. Why is that? And are you going to intervene? I mean, this is Washington, D.C. This is the backyard.
Yeah. Chuck, unfortunately, what you're showing in Washington, D.C. exists in too many parts of the country, and that is unacceptable. Communities of color have been hit disproportionately hard by this disease, suffering death rates twice the average. So it's really, really important that when we come to vaccine distribution, that we do it in a fair and equitable way. The situation that you're describing is not fair and equitable. We need to bring vaccines to people where they are, which is why community health centers are so important. They serve over 30 million Americans. 2/3 of those that use community health centers live below the poverty line. 60% come from communities of color. That's why the president established a program to send vaccine directly to community health centers. We're using mobile units to reach people where they are. And the pharmacy program is set up in a way where the pharmacies are focused on areas that are disadvantaged and most hard hit. So the new federal programs are all established and run with equity first and foremost in mind. We are holding states and governors accountable for fair and equitable distribution of the vaccine.
But the results haven't been good, and we're talking in cities that, you would assume there wouldn't be these kind of political problems with it. It's Chicago, it's Washington, D.C. Is this because of access to computers? Has this been the issue?
Well, there has been difficulty with access for too many Americans, people of color and other Americans, and we need to make that better. And the first thing to do is to increase supply so there is access to the vaccine, but at the same time, you're right, too many websites are confusing and don't work. There are not enough call centers or other ways to schedule a vaccine. We're working with states to make that situation better. Many governors and states have improved their access, but we need equal access across the board. We need to fix this problem. We need to hold ourselves accountable to both speed and efficiency, but fairness and equity in the distribution of the vaccine.
All right. Well, I think that's what a lot of folks will be doing. Jeff Zients, the White House Coronavirus Response Coordinator, thank you for coming on and sharing the administration's perspective.
And it's going to be beautiful.
We've made it more comfortable over the years. Not intentionally, maybe it evolved into that. Maybe it has to be more painful. Maybe you have to stand there. There's things we can talk about. But Chris, whenever you take away in the Senate the ability for the minority, whoever it may be, Democrats or Republicans, to have input, why do you have 2 senators in a Rhode Island and 2 senators in a New York or a California? Why is there one body that treats everyone, hopefully, the ability to intervene, the ability to be involved, the ability to represent, no matter how large or small? That's so the big person doesn't take advantage of a smaller person or a person in not just stature, but in their position. That's what this is all about, and I'm going to fight for that.
But just to be clear, with 30 seconds left, you would consider making it a lot harder to invoke the filibuster so that you just don't automatically have 60 votes that you need for any legislation.
I'd make it harder to get rid of the filibuster. I'm supporting the filibuster. I'm going to continue to support the filibuster. I think it defines who we are as a Senate. I'll make it harder to get rid of it, but it should be painful if you want to use it. You should make sure the place works to where, okay, I want to work with you. How can we do this? How do we move forward? My Republican friends are my friends. They're not my enemies. And my Democrats is my colleagues. They're not my enemy either. That's my caucus. Together, we've got to make this place work, and it should be harder to invoke pain. It should be painful for us. Don't make it painful for the other side.
Senator Manchin, thank you. Thanks for your time after a very busy few days, and we'll be watching the bill's progress on the Hill this week.
Thank you, Chris. It's a great piece of legislation. It's going to help Americans for a long time.
Thanks you again. Up next, some states are bucking the recommendations of public health officials and lifting COVID restrictions. We'll talk with one of those governors when we come right back.
Increase the body's immune response, or that can prolong bleeding.
Baldwin of Wisconsin. One of these days when we're not always talking about coronavirus, you and I are going to talk about healthcare like we used to in the old days, because we do have to get back to that. So thank you so much for your time this morning, Senator Tammy Baldwin of Wisconsin. All right, you're looking at a live shot of Franco Hariri Stadium. This is in the city of Erbil, Iraq, where Pope Francis is holding a mass for the Christian community. Later, he is expected to lead homily. It's the pontiff's first trip to the Middle Eastern country. Over 1 million Christians are estimated to live in the majority Muslim country. It does look pretty crowded at the event. We are told that attendance was limited due to COVID concerns. We're going to keep our eye on that for you. And it was a vote-a-rama that took more than 24 hours to come together, but finally the Senate officially passed President Biden's $1.9 trillion COVID relief bill yesterday. It heads to the House, where it will likely pass, meaning another round of stimulus checks could be on the way. We're going to break down your biggest questions, like who's eligible and when you can expect to see that money in the bank. And a programming note tonight, climate and environmental activist Greta Thunberg joins my friend Mehdi Hasan to discuss the latest on our climate crisis. The Mehdi Hasan Show airs tonight, 8 p.m. Eastern, only on MSNBC. We'll be right back.
When you have nausea, heartburn, indigestion, upset stomach, diarrhea, Pepto-Bismol coats and soothes your stomach for fast relief. And get the same fast relief in a delightful chew with Pepto-Bismol Chews.
If you love it, spoon it. Introducing Colliders, your favorite candy flavors twisted, chopped, or layered into a dessert that's made to spoon. New Colliders desserts. Find them near the refrigerated pudding.
I'm Jason Tatum. Check out my...
And in one way, we can look at this as being the new industry. It's a homelessness industry here. As tech is leaving, this is replacing it, is this kind of madness.
Well, here's some more of the madness as far as the cost breakdown. As I mentioned, $16 million, $16.1 million, 262 tents, $61,000 per tent per year, $5,000 per tent per month. You're talking about sort of the industry, the homelessness industry and lobby there. How do you get to $5,000 per tent per month? Who's approving that?
Well, we have the Board of Supervisors again, and they're the ones that decide where the money goes, along with the mayor, London Breed.
But it's a tent. It's a tent,
It's a
Richie.
tent.
It's a tent.
I know that. It's a tent, but they're doing what they can to squeeze in the homeless that come here. And what we're finding out, it's really not anything new. But our mayor is finally waking up to the fact that a large percentage of those who are homeless on the streets here aren't even from San Francisco, and they've come here over the years specifically to take advantage of the liberal assistance that is being offered. And so in order to do that, they do something like this, is put tents around the city. I've seen multiple of these sites, that they so-called safe sleeping sites, and they're more like corrals. They put temporary fencing around an area. They put tarp over the fencing so you can't see in. And during the day, many of those who are homeless loiter. They come around outside into the neighborhoods, into the shopping areas, into the residential areas, and just hang around. Many of them get high or drugs and pass out, and then they go back into their site. They go back into the tent. Yeah.
The logical extent of liberal policies laid before you in San Francisco. Richie, thank you so much for speaking out. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Of course, and we reached out to Mayor London Breed's office, the mayor of San Francisco, and we haven't heard back. There you go. Still ahead, one of the hardest hit groups by COVID lockdowns, working moms. You just saw the graphic. Women participation in the workforce now hitting record lows. We'll talk to our mothers panel. That's next.
Loves me?
We had a list of more things we don't have compared to everyone else than what we do have.
But what they have in abundance is beauty, something nearby Canadians can't resist. They pour across the border in the summertime, quadrupling the population here. But now, all they can do is come to that invisible boundary, in this case marked by small yellow barricades, and look across.
I was hopeful in the beginning.
That's where we met Maggie Morey.
So this little curb, it might as well be a 40-foot wall.
Exactly.
She owns this cottage, just a stone's throw from where we were talking. And so do a lot of other Canadians. You can tell which ones, because they haven't been allowed to tend to their properties in almost a year.
It's devastating. I miss it like a family member I haven't seen in over a year. Truly.
Cross-border commerce is the lifeblood of Point Roberts, making up as much as 85% of the annual income for the businesses here.
My credit card thinks I've died and gone to heaven because I haven't used it down here.
Without Canadians, this little corner of America may have dodged COVID, but not its ripple effect.
There's some days we don't have a single customer.
Beth Calder runs a package receiving business here. Canadians can avoid expensive international shipping fees on their Amazon and eBay purchases by just picking them up across the border instead. But for almost a year, those same packages have sat orphaned, some 2,000 of them.
And what does that do to your business?
Oh, it's crippling. It's very crippling. Last March, I had to lay off 8 of my 10 staff instantly as soon as the border closed.
Canadians also used to cross the border for cheaper prices on eggs and milk. That's, in part at least, why Point Roberts' only grocery store is this big. Owner Allie Hayton thought about closing when the border did, but she knew she couldn't.
If I close, there's no access to food for anyone. We've got to take care of the people that live here.
Some have already moved for good. This used to be a busy street right along the border. Not far away, the gas stations are empty. Restaurants are shuttered. We found a bank that had left.
Ghost town. It's a ghost town.
At the Bald Eagle Golf Club, Rick Houle and the rest of his grounds crew still tend to the empty fairways and bunkers in the hopes that one day their town will get out of the rough, but it has to happen soon.
How many people do you normally get?
We usually run around 20,000 a year.
And this year?
None. I know, it's sad.
the longer this goes on, the fewer people we're going to have. They have to move for unemployment because there is none here.
So how long can that last, though?
Well, until we run out of people, period.
Point Roberts is a lifestyle as much as it is a destination. Residents pride themselves on their independence. So if they ask for a hand, they really mean it. The fear, though, at least in the age of COVID, is that they may be shouting into the wilderness.
We can weather almost anything in our community. We're extremely resilient overall, and that comes with a double-sided sword, right? Because sometimes you can be resilient to the point that other people forget that you're here.
For a tasty discount. Let's roll.
Our gatherings and us working together. The Democrats and Republicans talking. We've been working together for over a month on this. And an awful lot of the things that I was able to, because of the position I'm in right now, was able to bring that forward to what they believed in too. This piece of legislation has far-reaching, I think, assets for the American public. We're helping everybody. There's no one missed in this piece of legislation, and I'm proud of it. Also, Chuck, on this legislation, this is the first time that we were able to put absolute direct targets on what needed to be fixed in America. Every city in America, every county in America, every municipality, every incorporated town is going to have a chance to control their own destiny because we put infrastructure in this also, in the state and in the state municipal cities. It's going to be wonderful. They can fix sewers, they can fix water projects, everything.
Let me ask you this. I know where you stand on the filibuster itself. But as you know, these election reform proposals that the House has passed, and you know Chuck Schumer is very in favor of them, and it's got a lot of sort of Democratic-based support here. Do you believe in the idea of a carve-out where you could pass election-related bills just like you do with budget reconciliation, with 50 votes rather than 60. Are you open to a concept like that?
Well, let me give you this concept, Chuck. What you saw happen with that 50-vote swing and one vote, no matter who it may be, can make a big difference in a tied Senate. Can you imagine doing day-to-day operations this way? Can you imagine not having to sit down, or there's no reason for you to sit down with your colleagues on both sides and have their input? The Senate is the most unique body of government in the world, the governing body in the world. It's deliberate. It's basically designed, Chuck, to make sure the minority has input. That's exactly our founding fathers. And now, if you want to make it a little bit more painful, make them stand there and talk, I'm willing to look at any way we can, but I'm not willing to take away the involvement of the minority. I've been in the minority, I've been in the majority. And I can tell you the respect I have on both sides when I've been there should be, I got something to say, listen to me. And I want that to happen.
Well, Senator, the filibuster was never an idea of the Founding Fathers. That is a Senate rule that was created by senators later, in fairness. It's not a Founding Father idea. Let me ask you this. You didn't directly answer my question about would you be willing to go a reconciliation route for election-only bills like H.R. 1?
Let me say this. I'm not willing to go into reconciliation until we at least give bipartisanship or get working together or allow the Senate to do its job. Just by assuming that, hey, they'll never work with us. That's the other side. This is tribal. Republicans will never agree on anything, or Democrats will never agree. I don't subscribe to that. I don't buy into that. There's no need for us to go to reconciliation until the other process has failed. That means the normal process of a committee, a hearing, amendments, Chuck, and that's where I am.
Welcome back to State of the Union. I'm Jake Tapper. Texas and Mississippi's governors are facing criticism this week after the decisions to roll back statewide mask mandates, despite advice from health experts who warn it's still too soon to back off such safety measures. Joining us to discuss his decision, the Republican governor of Mississippi, Governor Tate Reeves. Governor Reeves, thanks so much for joining us. I want to start with your decision to end Mississippi's state-imposed mask mandates and restrictions on businesses. Take a listen to what Dr. Anthony Fauci had to say about that decision this week.
It just is inexplicable why you would want to pull back now. I understand the need to want to get back to normality, but you're only going to set yourself back if you just completely push aside the public health guidelines.
The CDC just released a study that said areas with no mask mandates or dining restrictions experience increased, increased rates of infection and death. Health experts believe that because of your decisions, Mississippians will unnecessarily get sick and die. What's your response?
Well, Jake, thanks for having me on today. I always appreciate the opportunity. And the fact of the matter is that all of these individuals who for a year have said, follow the science, follow the data, now want me, when things are going down, to completely ignore the data. The fact is, in America, we're seeing approximately 70,000 cases a day. Mississippi is 1% of the U.S. population, and therefore we should be seeing about 700 cases a day if we were on par with the U.S. The fact is, our 7-day average is under 450 cases. But Jake, I'll tell you, the total number of cases, even though we're about 40% below the national average, I'm less concerned about number of cases and more concerned about our objective. Our objective in Mississippi has never been to rid ourselves of the virus or make sure that no Mississippian actually gets the virus, because we don't think that's a realistic goal. Our goal is to ensure that we protect the integrity of our healthcare system such that every single Mississippian that gets the virus, that can get better with quality care, receives that quality care. And therefore, we look much more closely from a data standpoint at hospitalizations, number of Mississippians in the ICU, number of Mississippians on ventilators. And the fact of the matter is, all of those numbers have plummeted in our state over the last 2 months.
So, but here's,
plummeted.
I don't think anybody's saying ignore the data. I think they're saying we're not there yet. And, you know, we've been through this before. Back in September, when cases were roughly the same level they are now, you lifted Mississippi's statewide mask mandate then and relaxed social distancing requirements then. At the time you said, quote, it was a very turbulent summer, but we've come out on the other side. But then cases began to rise again, and you ultimately went through an even worse surge over the winter. More than 3,000 Mississippians lost their lives during that time. We know more people are likely to get sick and die without mask mandates. That's what the science says. Why is this a trade-off you're willing to make, given the fact that we've really been here before?
Well, the fact is that in our state, throughout this pandemic, our approach has been to not only protect lives, but to also protect livelihoods. We have to get our economy rolling so that individuals can get back to work, and I think that's critically important. Let's talk a little bit more about the data. The fact is that at our peak, we had 1,450 Mississippians in hospital beds because of the virus. Today, that number is below 400. At our peak, we had 360 Mississippians in ICU beds. At this point, that number is below 120.
Bipartisan corona.
Instead of $400 a week.
Neighbor, come on.
Democrats voted against it. Joe Biden in his inaugural address said, I want to work together with you. We can work together. 10 Republicans went to the White House and said, all right, let's work together. Instead, the White House Chief of Staff said, this is the most progressive piece of domestic legislation in a generation. This was never about getting people back to work or kids back to school or the disease behind us. That's where it should have been focused.
I want to be curious about one thing on checks. In fact, the former president, Donald Trump, argued this week that if Senate Republicans had gone ahead and agreed to make bigger stimulus checks, there'd be a Republican Senate, and you wouldn't have lost those Georgia Senate seats. Do you agree with him?
No. You know, I voted for the $600 checks that were in the bill that President Trump approved right around Christmas time. The issue is this bill that we just passed.
You don't wish they were higher
check
at the
right
time?
now. Well, not to the level that people are getting them now. With this bill, they're going to people in prison. They're going to people who are illegal immigrants. They're going to people who make much more money than you would expect people to actually need relief or help at this point. So
are doing, both on restrictions for businesses, and they are also lifting the mask mandates this week. Your reaction to all of that?
Well, first off, I think, Chris, it is true. We are really sick and tired of this virus, and there's a lot of good news coming. More vaccines, more people getting vaccines, more options for vaccines, and really good data that vaccination is making a big difference. So I would make a big distinction between reopening the economy and lifting mask mandates. One of them you can debate, the other is simply wrong.
Well, explain that a little bit. Clearly you think that opening businesses is debatable, but lifting the mask mandates is flat wrong?
That's right. And this is the way to think about it. There are a lot of harms to closing businesses, not just economic harms, educational harms when it comes to schools, personal hardship, health harms from people not having work. So it's really important to get our economy open again as safely as possible. Now, I wouldn't necessarily open everything. For example, an indoor stadium with people coming from all over, that's a really bad idea. On the other hand, masks, you know, the only freedom a mask inhibits is the freedom of the virus to spread and kill people. Masks work, mask mandates work, and lifting mask mandates is very dangerous, particularly with the risk of more dangerous variants emerging and spreading.
But let's talk about this, because this isn't just Mississippi and Texas. There's a push in this area across the country. I'm going to put up two maps for you to take a look at, Doctor. The first one is this week 16 states, all run by Republican governors across the South and the Midwest and some of the Rocky Mountain states. 16 states, all run by Republican governors, will either have lifted mask mandates or never had them. And all 50 states, all 50 run by Republican and Democratic governors, will be either mostly or partly open for business, and some of them at 100% capacity. Is that, clearly on the masks you think it's too much too soon. On the opening businesses, are you concerned that that's moving too fast, particularly 100% capacity in gyms and restaurants and bars?
Well, interestingly, Chris, those two things are related. If you keep a mask mandate in place, you'll be able to open more and be more likely to keep it open without risk to people, not just to other customers, but the workers there as well. I do worry about restaurants and bars where people may be speaking loudly without masks on, and you really do have to focus. You know, the governor said, well, if you don't want to go into a restaurant where people aren't wearing masks, you can go to a different restaurant. Not if you're the waiter. If you're the waiter, yeah, you can wear a mask, but you're much safer if the customers wear a mask when they're not eating, obviously, and you wear a mask. So mask mandates are a way of preserving our health and our economy.
Doctor, as we said in the last segment, President Biden is coming down pretty hard on these governors who are relaxing restrictions. His famous phrase this week, Neanderthal thinking. But the day after, Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas, noted that with a lot of people right now coming across the border illegally into this country, that 108 people who had been released in Brownsville, Texas, had tested positive for the COVID virus. And Governor Abbott continued on with this. Take a look.
The Biden administration was exposing Texans to COVID. That is Neanderthal type approach to dealing with the COVID situation.
Doctor, is this the right time to be relaxing immigration restrictions and allowing more people to come across the border and more people to be released into the country when you're in the midst of a public health crisis?
Well, let's get the numbers straight here. The United States has more than 50,000 cases a day diagnosed, and probably 2 or 3 times that many actually occurring every day. The vast majority, 99.999% of the infections spread in the U.S. arise in the U.S. Let's focus on getting our house in order, and we can do that by masking up, doubling down on protection protocols, vaccinating the moment it's your turn. And as we do that, Chris, over the next few months, we will get to a much safer situation. We will get to a new normal. But I think masks are going to be a part of that normal for many months to come. That's the sensible thing to do to get our kids back in school, people back to work, and our economy moving again.
But you talk about the fact that we're
investigation regarding Augusta Fells, so we will continue to update you on that. And this story is only going to get more complicated, Jonathan, post-pandemic, when you're going to see massive grade inflation and all sorts of nonsense that's going to emerge to make up for the fact that these kids have been out of in-person learning for a very, very long time.
Yes, and in fact, some of these standardized tests are being eliminated or delayed, so the measure that we have of success is being stopped. And that's why some of these unions are acting less like unions as they are cartels. I mean, we need to have greater transparency, not less transparency, in looking at how these children are being educated or the lack of that education. And this mother's fight, she's holding down 3 jobs, supporting 3 children. She didn't fail. We failed her. I'm a huge believer in public education. I sent my kids to public education because I believe in the concept of public education. I've been an educator for 30 years, but I take my hat off to the teachers in elementary and high school education because they're the ones that shape citizens. And this is a terrible failure for our country.
Yeah, the bureaucratic, union-controlled system fails a lot of people. Jonathan Turley, thanks for exposing it. We appreciate it. Thanks, Jonathan. Posted. Thank you. All right, we've got a few additional headlines as well, including this. Meghan Markle's latest critic is a lawyer fighting for justice for murdered columnist Jamal Khashoggi. The lawyer blasting Markle for wearing these earrings. They were initially gifted to Queen Elizabeth by the Saudi crown prince, who allegedly ordered Khashoggi's murder in 2018. The lawyer says the earrings were, quote, bought with blood money and given to her by a murderer. Markle's lawyers say she was unaware of the prince's involvement in Khashoggi's death when she wore the jewelry. Sounds like a big old fake outrage. And meanwhile, Prince Philip remains hospitalized after undergoing heart surgery last week. A spokesperson for the palace called the procedure successful, but said the 99-year-old is expected to stay in the hospital for further treatment. He's been in the hospital since last month for an infection. Let's see if we move off of the royals here. The organization that awards the Golden Globes vows to undergo transformational change to overcome diversity issues within its ranks. The Hollywood Foreign Press says it's consulted with outside advisors and has even hired a diversity expert. The move comes after an LA Times report saying the 87-member association doesn't have a single black member. Hollywood. And to baseball, one pitcher definitely had his eye on the prize. LA Dodgers pitcher Trevor Bauer pitches 3 scoreless innings with one eye closed against rival San Diego Padres. He would also retire 6 of 7 batters faced. After the game, Bauer said he was just having a bit of fun. Dodgers manager Dave Roberts says Bauer does it to himself to readjust the command of his pitches. Unfortunately, the Dodgers did lose to the Padres. I didn't know that was a technique, Will. Did you?
No. Did not know that.
Maybe Rick can do the weather with one eye closed. That would be something to see.
Guaranteed. Guaranteed, without any problems at all. That's a lot easier than pitching. all my eyes closed, I can do it, guys. Just stay right here. All right, I tell you what. Restriction.
Well, I haven't excluded anything, but what I'm focused on right now is reuniting the families. And in terms of not happening again, our intention also in the task force, after the reunification of the families, after restoration of the families to the best of our abilities and as fully as the law permits, is to build institutional safeguards to make sure it does not happen again.
Allie, I mean, the key there is, as Secretary Mayorkas said, he has not excluded anything as the leader of the Family Separation Task Force when it comes to looking into potential criminality of the Trump administration. So I think on the one hand, you have this looking back at how to unwind the cruelty of the Trump administration, and on the other hand, looking forward at what is really a Herculean task to basically wholesale reform what immigration is in the United States of America.
Jacob, you're a fantastic reporter. You were somewhere on the border when you were conducting that interview, and you didn't include the best part of what happened to you while you were at the border.
I think you might be referring to when I had to do a little dodge of the light that came flying down. I have to say, in fairness to everyone involved, I love my crew very much. It gets very, very windy down there at Otay Mesa at the border.
No, you didn't miss a beat. The light came down on you. You sort of deflected it and carried on with your great reporting. Thank you, my friend, for everything
that you've
done.
It's all that practice, 3-point shooting, Ali.
That's right. Well, I appreciate all the reporting you've done and the knowledge you bring to this, because despite the fact that the other administration is gone, the problem remains with us, and we're going to have to continue to hold this administration accountable to fixing immigration in this country. Jacob Soboroff, NBC News correspondent, off.
We've just been chased off away from where the mine is. These guys are proof that they're trying to control the people who go in, and therefore trying to control the information that comes out. What is the percentage chance COVID is man-made?
0, because we don't have enough knowledge to make a SARS-CoV-2 virus from all the known existing viruses.
China's top-secret Wuhan Institute of Virology has been at the center of controversial allegations COVID was created in a lab here. The city was ground zero for the world's first known cases. But scientists say the search for COVID's origin should not be limited to one country.
Bats don't recognize borders, and neither do viruses. From here in remote Yunnan province, 4 Southeast Asian nations are less than 200 miles away: Vietnam, Myanmar, Laos, and Thailand.
Some bat species can fly 200 miles in one day. At Khao Chong Pran Temple, west of the Thai kingdom's capital, Bangkok, millions of these flying mammals mesmerize tourists each sunset. They've also attracted Thailand's Batwoman, Supapon Wacharapusadi. Since the pandemic hit, she and her team from the Thai Red Cross have sampled Thai bats for coronaviruses to determine how close they are to COVID.
The similarity is 91%, but we found it could not infect human cell.
The people who collect bat dung in Khao Chong Pran's caves to sell for fertilizer are proof not one has tested positive for coronavirus antibodies. What we still don't know, how or where coronavirus jumped from bats to humans.
More and more likely looks like a human infection that brought the virus to Wuhan.
Earlier this year, delegates from the World Health Organization visited Wuhan, but they've now scrapped their interim report after allegations China did not give them full access to all the data. Further complicating a mystery that could take years, even decades to solve, if ever at all.
Opportunity to get the Johnson & Johnson vaccine and says, oh, I don't know. Mayor Duggan said I should hold out for the Moderna or Pfizer vaccine. What's your message to that resident of Detroit?
Take that vaccine. I am going to take whatever vaccine is available to me when my category comes up. We are dropping our ages to 50 and up. If you have some sort of a health condition, starting tomorrow, they are now eligible, and 50 and up for everyone 2 weeks later. We want to make it easier for people to get vaccines, and when my number is up, I'll be in that next group after that. I will get whatever vaccine is available to me because they all have high efficacy. They're all incredibly safe. And the quicker we can get to 70% of our population vaccinated, the quicker we can have some more normalcy in our day-to-day lives. And I know we all want that.
Republican lawmakers are calling on the Justice Department to investigate your handling of COVID in long-term care facilities. You allowed hospitals to discharge medically stable COVID patients back to nursing homes as long as those facilities had dedicated isolation units and PPE for staff. You set up regional hubs for those that did not. I know that you stand by the policy decision. The Detroit News editorial board is calling for you to release all data related to nursing home cases and deaths. Will you do that?
We have released an incredible amount of data. We have followed the federal requirements every step of the way. I think that's why when you look at Michigan compared to other states, our nursing home deaths are less than most. AARP has acknowledged that, and the University of Michigan put out a study that shows our policies in that space actually saved a lot of lives. We've been very focused on helping our nursing homes, on residents of nursing homes. The nature of this virus is that older adults who are in congregate care facilities are more at risk. That's something that has driven a lot of our policy work, stocking them up with PPE and tests and vaccines. I mean, we've done good work in that space, and we're going to continue to because it's important.
Your fellow Democratic governor and the leader of the National Governors Association, Andrew Cuomo, is facing multiple accusations of sexual harassment and inappropriate behavior. Charlotte Bennett, a former aide of his, gave a rather devastating interview to CBS News this week and said that Governor Cuomo, who was a mentor to her, repeatedly made unwanted advances. Take a listen to this quick clip.
I thought, he's trying to sleep with me. The governor's trying to sleep with me. And I'm deeply uncomfortable. And I have to get out of this room as soon as possible.
Governor Cuomo is not denying her account. He just says she misinterpreted it. Assuming he said what she said he did, and he doesn't deny it, does that constitute sexual harassment?
Well, I think the allegations here are very serious and need to be taken seriously. And I do think that an impartial, thorough, independent investigation is merited and appropriate.
Other female former aides have gone on the record to allege inappropriate conduct or sexual harassment by him. In 2017, you tweeted, quote, "Sexual harassment is not a partisan issue and is unacceptable no matter who does it." Do you think that Governor Cuomo sexually harassed Charlotte Bennett?
Well, as I said, Jake, I have to tell you, I think that these are serious allegations. And if accurate and true, and I think we have to take action. But we also need to make sure that there is that thorough investigation. I know that the Attorney General is moving forward that, and that's something that I know that everyone who's weighed in acknowledges that's an important piece to then determine what accountability looks like.
I mean, you've been very outspoken on these issues, and look, it's not fair for me to hold you responsible for Governor Cuomo's behavior. He wouldn't come on our show today, you will. But I just wonder, you're a very prominent woman leader who's been very outspoken on these issues in a great way. What was your reaction emotionally when you watched that interview with Charlotte Bennett?
Well, I think that there are a lot of American women who have felt how she felt. And I think that that's something that resonates, and why we need to take this seriously, and why there needs to be a full investigation, and whatever is appropriate in terms of accountability should follow. And I think it wouldn't help anyone for me to prejudge where this is headed, but I had the same gut-wrenching reaction that I'm sure that a lot of women in America did.
Governor Gretchen Whitmer, thank you so much for being with us today. Best of luck to you and the state of Michigan getting out of this pandemic. And I'm sorry you're on the wrong side of 50, but I hope you get a vaccine soon.
Thanks, Jake. Have a good one.
To be honest, I'd rather be on her side of 50. But anyway, the thing about politicians is they always manage to see themselves as the good guys. We'll have more on that next.
I-29 RV Supercenter.
Alone, it's the number of migrants reaching the borders 3 times what it was, and it's only going up. It's going to get worse by the end of the spring. One of the things that the Trump-Pence administration did was a remain in Mexico policy that required migrants to stay in Mexico as their asylum claims were adjudicated. Now, by rescinding that, basically immigrants are allowed to walk freely into our country, and the numbers are going to continue to increase. You're going to continue to see the using of human trafficking, of taking young kids, unaccompanied minor, to the border is going to continue to increase. And just think about your last segment. The reality is right now, if you're an American citizen and you have to fly back in the United States, you're required to get tests. But if you walk up to our border as an illegal, you're allowed to come straight in without any COVID tests. That's something that Governor Abbott pointed out in your last segment.
I got about 20 seconds, Juan. Your thoughts about this. Isn't the Biden administration leaving itself open to a real problem at the border?
I think we do have a real problem at the border, Chris. I think the biggest change in policy
is halting the immediate expulsion of unaccompanied minors. And the Biden administration is simply trying to have a more humane, rapid processing response.
But they got some problems at this point. We'll see what happens. Thank you, panel. See you next Sunday. Up next, our Power Player of the Week, the man behind the fitness machine that's helping millions stay in shape during the pandemic lockdown.
Chicago, Bill.
Thank you. Yes, let's not let the perfect be the enemy of the good. In other words, it's not a perfect bill, but it is a good bill. You've had over 23 million Americans out of work over the last year. The government's cut a check for $3,200 maximum, and in over 52 weeks, that's less than $100 a week for those who really need the money. Yes, Democratic states, I'm in Illinois, Chicago at one point, and maybe still is $35 billion in the hole in terms of pension payments. Chicago needs the money. The state of Illinois needs the money. California, yes, maybe they run it a surplus. However, eventually they may need the money as well. So let's not let, and let me add one other thing. The Republicans, you got millionaire Republicans suggesting that the people don't need the money. Well, guess what? Why don't you work for free, Senator, since you're a millionaire, and then tell me, let me tell you, you don't need your Senate check.
Okay,
So,
Steve in Iowa, an independent. Steve?
Good morning.
Morning.
I think this bill represents exactly what's wrong with the country. Giving money to people who are fully employed, who have not suffered at all during the pandemic. I live in a state with a 3% unemployment rate, and companies can't find workers. And yet, we're paying overtime, higher wages, giving merit increases, giving bonuses, and on top of that, here comes stimulus checks. Stimulus checks for employees who are fully employed, who have insurance, and this is being repeated around the country. I haven't heard any politician answer the question why we're giving money to people who are fully employed. Have you heard an answer to that question, Greta?
No, Steve. And why do you think it's important to ask?
Well, I think it's important to ask because it's wasteful. I mean, like what Kennedy has said in the bill, giving money to people who don't need it, don't deserve it, and then all the other organizations that represent the pork in the bill, looking at the U.S. debt clock, every 20 seconds that goes by, we add another $1 million of interest to our U.S. debt.
Okay,
So,
Steve. I'm going to leave it there so I can get in Ken as well, who's in South Dakota. Ken, a Republican?
Yes. I think what President Biden and also Schumer keeps saying is that 68% of Americans were in favor of a COVID relief bill. What they don't say is that this bill includes much more than COVID relief, and I don't think that was even mentioned in the polls. So the people were voting, wanted a COVID relief bill. They didn't want a bill that included a lot of extra pork. Also, people really ought to be upset about $1,400 a week going to government employees that's in this bill.
Okay,
Thank
Ken.
you.
Let me go to Robert. Virginia, an independent. Robert in
razor wire, the actual bezel setting right here. So if you were a silversmith, you would use this to actually bezel.
crew will be composed entirely of
Position. Bend and dip on that ball.
But let me tell you, I know you can wake up some mornings, look out, and be a little bit frustrated by what you're looking at.
There. And many of those chemicals.
Yet, you are now not prevented from accessing these PPP loans.
Yeah, super important.
And building new businesses there, and that's what I'm most passionate about.
Create designer babies, but even the Chinese were appalled by what he did, and eventually he gets tried and put under house arrest.
Since that event, DAKOTA has been hosting a series of international conferences.
Supply chain is ready. Yeah, and vulnerable. You've got currency issues.
No tolerance, zero tolerance for sex pests and pigs like these.
Well, that is one way to sort of end that segment there. I think there is universal agreement that we are all tired of seeing this bad behavior from people that are supposed to be role models. Anyway, thank you, panel. That's all we have for today. Thank you for watching. We'll be back next week, because if it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press.
It's the no commitment sale at Planet Fitness. Join for just
Serious allergic reactions may occur.
free zone. Join Planet Fitness for 25 cents down and no commitment.
The 2021 Grammys are gonna be music's biggest night, and it's gonna be my biggest night too. I haven't left my apartment in almost a year. Ooh, I'm gonna be outside. I'm gonna be outside. Is that a person? Hi, person. I'm outside.
Trevor Noah hosts the Grammys, live Sunday, March 14th on CBS.
That does it for us. Have a happy Sunday. Have a good day, Jedediah. Have a good day, Pete.
Yep, happy Sunday, everyone. We'll see you back here next weekend.
Have a great Sunday, everybody. I met Noelle in North Carolina. She goes to church after every time I say it. Go to church, Noelle. Have a great Sunday.
Good. From CoverGirl.
Major.
Now, help is on the way.
Nearly $2 trillion in COVID relief passes the Senate. After a marathon debate, millions awaiting a financial lifeline. As America marks 1 year battling COVID.
We are at a critical nexus.
Vaccine production ramping up.
We're now on track to have enough vaccine supply for every adult in America by the end of May.
More than a dozen states relaxing restrictions.
All businesses are allowed to open 100%.
Is it too much, too soon?
I wish Texas, Mississippi, other states would just hold off.
Fears over what this rollback means for America's fight against the virus. We cover it all this morning with Senator Joe Manchin, a crucial swing vote, Ohio Governor Mike DeWine, and Dr. Ashish Jha. Plus,
we demand the right to protect our troops.
President Biden reshaping foreign policy, facing mounting challenges in the Middle East.
I want to talk about Saudi.
My wide-ranging conversation with America's new Defense Secretary, Lloyd Austin.
From ABC News, it's This Week, Here Now, co-anchor Martha Raditz.
Good morning and welcome to This Week. It's hard to believe, but it was 1 year ago that we were enjoying the last week of normal. People packed into sporting events and political rallies, eating in a restaurant less than 6 feet apart. In the days and weeks to come, major sports leagues and theaters going dark. The first stay-at-home orders going into effect. The pandemic paralyzing life as we knew it. The chilling death toll predictions beginning.
100,000 to 200,000, and we think that that is the range.
Nearly 12 months later, the virus has taken more than 500,000 lives, and there are more than 28 million U.S. cases. But with the country now averaging 2 million vaccine doses administered per day, there is also reason for hope, and Americans are itching to get back to normal. At least 14 states recently rolling back restrictions, Texas and Mississippi lifting their mask mandates. Public health experts caution it's still too soon, and a wave of rollbacks could risk any ground we've gained. At the center of this push and pull over public health, the economy. Once booming, now battered by the pandemic. This morning, Americans are one step closer to more financial relief after the Senate passed a sweeping $1.9 trillion COVID relief bill yesterday. The package includes another round of direct payments, although fewer Americans will qualify for the $1,400 payments. Unemployment benefits will be extended through September 6th, but will be $100 less than what President Biden wanted, at $300 a week. The bill also provides $130 billion for schools and $350 billion for state, local, and tribal governments. But it almost didn't happen. With no Republican support, marathon negotiations ensued as Democrats worked to keep their party unified in an evenly divided Senate. Moderate Senator Joe Manchin, a critical swing vote at the center of it all. And Senator Manchin joins me now. Senator, you brought the Senate to a standstill for 10 hours on Friday, threatened to side with Republicans, and did not budge until a call from the president and significant concessions were made. In the end, you got $300 a month instead of $400 for benefits. So in this pandemic economy, you don't think people need more money?
Well, first of all, Martha, it's good to be with you, okay? And next of all, I didn't do anything intentionally whatsoever. I did everything I could to bring us together so we'd have more support and the public would get the needed help that's needed. We have so many different ways that we're helping the public with this piece of legislation. It's not that I don't think. I think that basically what would have happened, going from 300 to 400, there's going to be a glitch where people are going to go without unemployment checks for a while. 300 has kept it systematically and kept a smooth transition through there. Also, we did things with child tax credits that we've never done before, which I'm so proud of, because we're going to help families with children, lift children out of poverty. Also, Martha, this was a targeted piece of legislation. It was because people need the help, and we helped every scenario. Also, we targeted our cities, our counties, our municipalities, to where they're going to be the first time having money that they're able to use and control their own destiny with infrastructure. They can fix water lines now, sewer lines, they can get internet. We've done so much, and we've extended this. This was all part of the big package, and I always try to work with my Democrat colleagues, my caucus, and my Republican friends, and there was an awful lot of input for over a last month.
Senator, we know you are all about bipartisanship, but President Biden did not get a single Republican vote for a relief package in the middle of a pandemic. So at this point, doesn't bipartisanship seem like a false hope?
Not at all, Martha. The first group of people that President Biden brought to the White House was 10 of my friends and colleagues, 10 Republicans, to see what their idea was. They came out with a proposal. He thought we needed to do a lot more, which that is his prerogative, and I support him with that. But with that, we had an awful lot of input from Republican friends all through this process. A lot of the changes that we
a lot of stuff that he had just sort of held in and repressed and, put aside so that he could do what he felt he needed to do.
Of course, for all of his travel overseas, Bob Hope never really took a break from his work back home. During and after the war, he joked and danced his way through movies and hosted the Oscars a record 19 times.
Welcome to the Academy Awards, or as it's known at my house, Passover.
He even found time to be the mystery guest alongside his daughter Linda on a popular game show of the day.
Is that a girl that answered? That is a female voice, is it not?
Yes. The USO shows didn't stop either. He toured from Korea to Vietnam and beyond, often coming under enemy fire himself.
Happy to be here, Tom Sanute, Southeast Asia's biggest rocket base. Mostly incoming.
Bob Hope lived to be 100, but daughter Linda says that late in his life, her dad started to come to grips with what he'd seen and all the people he'd met who never came home.
He went to the Vietnam Memorial, and to see him there, it still affects me. as an old man, and having his hand on the wall and knowing that those were guys, a lot of whom he entertained. I think he began to deal with some of this when he had time to sit and reflect, and I think it touched him.
Before he died in 2003, Congress officially made Bob Hope an honorary veteran.
I bet when I first started, you thought I was going to be lousy, huh?
Thousands of his letters were sent to the Library of Congress, a tribute to a war hero whose only weapons were one-liners and an enormous heart.
What do you hope that these letters reveal about your dad?
Really, his humanity. He wasn't a real warm, fuzzy guy, but you see underneath what's there, and it's real, and it's, I guess you could call it love. I think it is.